The 1950s. Alice and Jack live in a typical American town. They hang out with friends, have fun, drive around, and love each other. One day, while Alice is getting ready for a party with friends, Jack goes to work with a crowd of other white collars. A female voice narrates that today is the 997th day. All employees are on their way to headquarters. All residents are safe and accounted for. Ladies are wished a good day, and Alice starts her household chores. Then she goes to her dance classes, like all the exemplary wives in town. The instructor, Shelley, reminds them, beauty is in control and grace is in symmetry. After the class, Alice returns home, chats with her neighbor Bonnie, who constantly scolds her children, and goes to take down the dried laundry. A catchy tune constantly plays in Alice's head, and she hums it. Suddenly, she notices another neighbor, Margaret, standing in front of her house, oblivious to her surroundings. Alice starts cooking, but one egg arouses her suspicion. She squeezes it in her hand and the egg turns out to be empty. She crushes the rest, they're all hollow. This activity is interrupted by burnt meat. In the evening, she greets her husband, beautifully dressed, with her hair done, and at a set table. However, her husband decides to start with another, more pleasant activity. The next day, the women relax by the pool. Alice is distracted, the song in her head again causing her concern. Then a visual sequence appears, a circle of women in wigs. Later, Alice approaches a model of the town and mindlessly traces her finger along the streets. And when she leaves the town limits, Bonnie picks her up. It's time for cocktails served by her children. During this time, the men discuss distracting topics. Everything is decent, sunny, and calm. A signal sounds, and Shelley welcomes the new residents. She is happy that the couple can learn from her husband, Frank, who has created something extraordinary, a new world. Margaret interrupts Shelley's speech, saying she and her husband shouldn't be here. Alice's husband hastily leads her away, and the newly appeared Frank apologizes to the guests. The couple is going through a tough time. They're tasked to chase dreams and confront chaos, the main enemy of progress. And they all change the world. The guests echo Frank's words. Everyone here is happy, they are all one family. The man thanks the women for supporting their husbands, they are their support. The fun continues. Alice goes to find Jack, but finds Margaret, who says she has nightmares she can't be here, but Alice's husband quickly pulls the curtain in front of Alice. Alice finds her husband in the house. Jack kisses her, and the couple gets some alone time. But at the brightest moment, Alice sees Frank, who, smiling, watches their lovemaking. Later, the women gather in a shopping center and discuss their perfect lives, and poor Margaret. Alice feels sorry for her neighbor, though Bonnie thinks she brought the trouble on herself. After all, she took her son into the desert by herself. They found her, but without the child. The conversation turns to what the men are doing. No one knows for sure, but it's said that they are making weapons. Bonnie cuts in. That's not their business. Women also do work. They create comfort. At night, Alice has a nightmare, but in the morning, as usual, she sees her husband off to work and starts her household chores. Then she goes on a trip. She is the only one left on the trolley bus and says she just wants to ride. Suddenly, she sees a plane flying towards the mountains, and then it crashes. Alice yells to the driver, but he doesn't understand what she wants. She urges him to help the victims, but he is on his route and cannot deviate. Alice jumps out of the trolleybus and runs towards the mountains. She walks a long way through the desert, then reaches a road and climbs a high mountain, topped by a strange dome. She approaches closer and stops at a mirrored glass. Around her, no one, only her reflection. Alice raises her hands to the glass and loses consciousness. In front of her in the darkness, a circle of dancing women and a male voice calls for order. People must allow themselves to discover what life should be like. The next moment, Alice finds herself on her bed. Coming to the kitchen, she sees Jack preparing dinner. The dishes are in disarray, many groceries spoiled. Alice doesn't understand what's happening, and her husband explains that when he came from work, she was already asleep, and she returned home on the trolley bus. Alice doesn't understand. Did the driver come back for her? But now Jack looks at his wife uncomprehendingly. Alice decides she saw everything in a dream. The next morning, everything goes as usual. Alice sends her husband off and starts cleaning the window glass, but suddenly it seems to move. It presses her against the wall, and the woman is gasping for air. The next moment, the phone rings and Alice is completely free. Margaret's voice on the phone urges her to get out of there. After all, she was there and saw it all herself. Alice again sees dancing women, but now it is herself and her friends. and suddenly, instead of her own reflection, Margaret appears, approaching the mirror from the other side and starts banging her head against the surface. Alice screams and comes to. She runs home and sees Margaret on the roof of her house. Turning to Alice, the woman cuts her own throat and falls down. Alice screams in horror, and the arriving employees pick her up and carry away the neighbor's body. In the evening, she tries to explain to Jack, but he doesn't believe his wife. Margaret is in the hospital. She accidentally cut herself while washing windows. Alice feels guilty because her neighbor asked for help. What is happening around them? She asks him to tell her what he is doing on the project, but he cannot talk about it. He asks her to stop the hysterics, which could ruin everything. At night, Alice watches an advertisement for their town and catches herself thinking that it feels like she is floundering in a pool from which it is impossible to swim out. In the morning, she is cooking and suddenly starts wrapping her head with cling film. Alice seems to want to bring herself to her senses, but even the suffocation doesn't help, and she tears off the film. The arriving doctor assures the woman that it's just nervous strain, as Alice witnessed Margaret falling. The woman again insists that her neighbor slit her own throat. The doctor suggests prescribing her pills, but Jack refuses. They will cope. The doctor assures Margaret will soon recover and return home. He leaves, forgetting his briefcase, from which Alice manages to pull out a folder with Margaret's personal file. But all the text is smeared, unreadable. Alice burns the folder. She drinks alcohol and again sees dancing women. Then she finds herself in the bathroom. Jack is unhappy. They will be late, and he brings her a dress. Then he asks Alice to think about having a child, and tonight they have a wonderful evening ahead. The couple arrives at a restaurant where all the town's residents have already gathered. A performance by a glamorous blonde is demonstrated to the audience, and Alice again sees the circle of women and Margaret killing herself. Alice feels ill, but those around her do not notice. Frank gives a speech and invites Jack on stage. He is ready to congratulate the man as he is now entering the senior expert council. He presents Jack with a token of loyalty, a ring. The audience applauds, and Jack performs a dance of gratitude. Alice, unable to watch this, runs to the bathroom. She has a vision of another Jack who has lost his job. A perplexed Bonnie finds her. Alice tries to explain something, but her friend interrupts her. Was Alice at the headquarters? Has she gone mad? She's acting like a spoiled child. Her job is to support her husband, yet she is ruining his career. And now she is behaving like Margaret. Returning to the hall, Alice watches Jack's triumph and restrains herself. In the morning, Jack reminds her that they will have guests in the evening. She needs to express gratitude to Frank. Alice greets the guests with a smile on her face. Everything, as always, is perfect. Her husband meets Frank while Alice finishes the appetizers. The man enters the kitchen and suddenly starts talking to the hostess. He regrets that Bonnie didn't believe her, but she didn't believe Margaret either. He has been waiting a long time for someone to challenge him. The guests sit down at the table. Alice demonstratively takes the host's seat. Jack, complying, sits next to her. The conversation about nothing begins. Suddenly Alice asks why all the women in the town are from one, at most two states, and they all vacation in the same places. Jack tries to steer the conversation away, but Alice continues. They all met their husbands on a train, under similar circumstances. All their stories are the same because they are told what to remember, but sometimes they suddenly remember the forbidden. Frank is doing something with all of them. The man, smirking, reminds her of her nervous breakdown. Why isn't she getting treated? And why was she at the headquarters? Jack is horrified. She was at the headquarters? Frank continues. She broke the rules. It's the result of psychosis, but she revealed herself to him in his bedroom. Alice is stunned by such a dreadful lie, but Jack believes Frank unconditionally. The woman tries to appeal to the guests' common sense. Where do these products come from? And what's in them? But then Shelley stands up. She will no longer allow her husband to be insulted. The guests leave. Frank is disappointed. He expected something more interesting from her. Jack, having seen everyone out, returns to the house. Alice tries to convey to him that he is the most precious person to her. And she asks to leave here, anywhere, just together. And Jack agrees. They leave the house and get into the car, and then the husband apologizes to his wife, but in the next moment employees pull her out of the car and carry her into the darkness. Alice finds herself on an operating table. Visions with her husband pass by. A doctor in a mask leans over her, in which she recognizes herself. In the next moment, Dr. Alice finishes the operation and goes home, where her unemployed husband meets her. He hasn't prepared dinner because he didn't know what she would want. There's also no hot water. Alice is very tired. She has been standing at the operating table for 30 hours, so she denies her husband intimacy. He sits at the monitor and listens to the advertisement for a new simulation. And again, a sunny morning in Paradise Town. Alice returns to her surroundings. An enthusiastic Bonnie meets her and shares the latest news. Alice hugs her children and does not notice her friend's worried look. Her husband goes to work. Alice does household chores, dances, and swims. And she meets her husband. She takes the roast out of the oven while Jack picks a record, humming a song that seems to wake Alice up. Jack walks through the dark city, entering his apartment. Meanwhile, his physical characteristics are narrated. He is absolutely fit to participate in the Victory Project with his friend Alice, and he takes on the responsibility of maintaining his wife's body's vital functions. Alice sees herself in bed, restrained and entangled with wires. Jack cares for her body because he is obliged to exit the simulation each day and work to afford it. The man lies down next to her and hums the song that Alice is hearing now. She realizes he has deprived her of real life, but the man did this to save her from constant work. Frank created this world so they could live as they wanted. He works like a damned soul for this, but she is happy. But what about the others? So they really are hostages. Jack hugs her, but Alice hits him on the head. The next moment, Bonnie finds her. Jack is dead, and she immediately reports it to Frank. Bonnie confesses that she knows everything about the simulation. She chose this life herself because here she can be with her children, who are alive. But other women know nothing. Alice must run, or they will kill her. The woman steps out into the yard, goes to Jack's car, and drives into the desert. Employees chase after her. Cars catch up with her, but Alice, making a maneuver, causes a collision in which a doctor dies. Her pursuers continue the chase. Frank is informed of the incident. He orders the woman to be captured at all costs. In the next moment, Shelley stabs him with a knife. He is a fool and has botched everything. Alice races towards the mountain, but near the summit, her car stalls. She continues on foot. Employees pursue her, and there ahead, the dome. The woman approaches it, her pursuers just steps behind her, and suddenly feels her husband's hands on her shoulders, asking her not to leave him. Shelley reaches out. A strike. Darkness. Visions of the perfect life and victory. And a sigh from a woman waking up in reality. That case when it's hard to take someone's side. The husband deprived his wife of reality with good intentions to make her happy, and probably many would want to escape into the simulation from everyday problems. But can you make someone happy against their will? Every day, a young fisherman named Syracuse sets out to fish off the coast of Ireland. One day, he finds a young woman in his nets. He helps her, and when she regains consciousness, he is relieved to see that she seems unharmed. However, she behaves quite strangely and refuses to go to the hospital. She also can't remember her name, which Syracuse attributes to amnesia. He takes her to his late mother's house, offers her some sandwiches, and suggests she stay there for a while. He needs to go see his daughter. Annie lives with his ex-wife, Maura, and today he has to take the girl to dialysis. While the procedure is ongoing, he tells Annie a story about a fisherman who caught a woman from the sea. Annie explains that it was likely a selkie, a creature she learned about at school. Sometimes they come ashore until the sea calls them back. After the procedure, Syracuse takes Annie back to her mother, who is eager to show her the new electric wheelchair she received. Annie shows off the chair to her father, but her mother immediately criticizes him for not talking to the doctor about a new kidney for their daughter. The next morning, Syracuse finds a woman washing clothes in a stream, singing in an unknown language. She asks if she can come with him, and he lets her board his boat. On the way, she says her name is Ondine, which means from the water. Soon, Syracuse's boat stops for lobster fishing, but the baskets come up empty. Ondine begins to sing a song that Syracuse has never heard before, and suddenly every basket is filled with a catch. She helps him pull them out and is surprised when he throws the smaller ones and extras back into the sea. However, she flatly refuses to go with him to the market. He sells the lobsters to the astonished buyers and purchases a dress at a store. Then he heads to pick up Annie from school. On the way home, he continues the story about the fisherman and the woman from the sea. She sings to the fish, and he catches them. Both are happy. Annie thinks it's a dream because everything seems like his dream coming true. Moreover, no one knows the language she sings in. After dropping his daughter off at home, Syracuse heads back, not noticing that the curious girl is following him. He gives Ondine some clothes and food when he reaches the house and finds her talking to his father, who asks how long she'll be staying in his house. Hearing that it's up to him, Syracuse decides she'll stay forever to live with him happily ever after, like in the fairy tale he's been making up with Annie. After seeing everything with her own eyes, Annie goes to the library and asks for books about Selkies. Meanwhile, Syracuse goes to church to confess, admitting he's an alcoholic, even though he hasn't drunk for over 2 years. Lately, he's been haunted by a dream where he attends the funeral of his ex-wife's new husband, Alex, after which he reunites with Maura, who still struggles with alcohol problems. The priest advises him to see a psychologist, but Syracuse reminds him of the secrecy of confession and tells him that he pulled a woman out of the water with his net. Now he's hiding her from everyone else. The priest asks him to come to Mass as there's no other way he can help him. Meanwhile, Annie is studying legends about Selkies. Ondine cleans the cottage and then examines the new things Syracuse brought her. She's particularly intrigued by the fishnet stockings, which she stretches over one hand, making them look webbed. The next day, Annie goes to her grandmother's cottage and sees Ondine swimming. The girl boldly approaches the shore and declares that she knew all along. The story about the fisherman and the Selkie isn't a fairy tale. Annie tells her about her illness and asks her to heal her, but Ondine doesn't know magic and says so. The girl asks a lot of questions, and Ondine likes the lively and straightforward child. Annie asks her to always tell the truth, because what's the point of friendship otherwise? She's very curious about what it's like underwater. Is it better or worse than here? Ondine says it varies, but singing is easier there. Annie shares everything she's learned about Selkies from the books. They can stay on land for up to 7 years until they find happiness with a human. Then she abruptly shifts the conversation to her grandmother because her father still misses her very much. Remembering her mother, Annie prepares to go home, and Ondine asks her to come back again. Syracuse also goes to the library to borrow books about Selkies, only to find out that Annie has already taken them. Meanwhile, Annie meets up with the neighborhood kids who show off their bikes, and she lets one of the girls play with her wheelchair before it runs out of power and rolls into the water. The kids abandon Annie, and she has to make her way home where she's met by Alex. He recharges her battery and tells her that Selkies were invented in his homeland of Scotland, but the girl insists that Ondine speaks a different language. Meanwhile, Syracuse finds Ondine on a pontoon in the middle of the bay and offers to take her back to his boat. He asks her to hold the tiller, but when a patrol boat speeds by, Ondine hides and steers the boat with her foot. Syracuse teases her, noting that she manages just fine with her feet. She starts singing again as he pulls up his net and discovers it's filled with a bountiful catch of salmon, which his nets usually can't catch. Before he can fully enjoy his luck, Syracuse sees the patrol boat returning. The wildlife officers find the salmon and demand to see the nets he used to catch them. He shows them the usual nets for catching salmon, but they're completely dry, meaning he's telling the truth. However, the men notice Ondine hiding in the hold. She confirms that Syracuse caught the salmon in an ordinary net, and they leave the boat. Relieved that the officers believe their story and that nothing happened when Ondine was seen by people, they head to the harbor together to sell the catch. Syracuse offers to buy her a gift, and she asks for another dress, which she'll choose herself. On the way to the store, they run into Annie, who's thrilled that their story isn't just a fairy tale. The girl helps Ondine pick out an outfit while the townspeople gawk at the pretty stranger through the shop window. Later, Annie arrives at her grandmother's house, which looks festive and cozy thanks to Ondine's efforts. Ondine offers to teach the girl how to swim, and she agrees since she'll have someone from the sea by her side. They both play in the shallow water when Ondine suddenly sees something in the water and asks Annie to get on the raft. She pulls out a bundle, which Annie calls Selkie clothing. According to legend, if she buries it in the ground, she'll be able to stay on land for 7 years, provided her sea husband doesn't come for her. After listening to Annie, Ondine buries the find in the greenhouse, and Annie counts the steps to remember the exact spot. Later, she tells her father about it and advises him to watch out for strangers. Meanwhile, they all head to the local festival by boat, and Ondine denies Annie's claim that she can grant wishes because she's not really a Selkie. Upset, Annie pretends that her wheelchair brakes have failed and falls off the pier, hoping to test the truth of her words. Ondine jumps in to save her and pulls the girl to the surface. Syracuse carries Annie home and hands her over to Maura and Alex. Later, Ondine tells Syracuse that the wheelchair's brakes work just fine and that Annie was testing her ability to breathe underwater. He confesses that he used to drink heavily, but one day he returned from a trip to find Annie's mother sleeping next to their unconscious child. They saved the girl, and he decided that one of them had to stay sober at all times. Meanwhile, Maura tells Annie that a dark-haired stranger has been looking for the fisherman's girlfriend, which causes the girl to have a nightmare. Meanwhile, Syracuse and Ondine become intimate. Later, he goes to confession and admits to the priest that he sinned with Ondine the night before, and now he fears the luck she brings because he's long lost hope for the best. He knows that something wonderful or terrible will happen, and he's afraid of both. After the conversation, the fisherman steps outside and is approached by an unknown man who starts asking questions about Ondine. Syracuse ignores him and walks away. That day, he takes Annie to dialysis as usual, but when they return home, no one is there. Maura and Alex had been out drinking at the nearby pub. Syracuse takes the girl there. Finally reaching home, he finds the doors broken in and Ondine nowhere to be found. Syracuse searches the shore and eventually finds her hiding. She reminds him of the Selkie's husband and says he's here to take her away. Meanwhile, the intoxicated Maura is riding her daughter's wheelchair and, despite Alex's warnings, is determined to make it home on it. Syracuse hides Ondine in a secret cave behind the waterfall, offering to grant her a wish, but her only wish is for Annie to get well, so he wishes for her to be able to stay. Meanwhile, the man searching for Ondine is driving around town and gets into a car accident, colliding with a car driven by the intoxicated Maura. Alex is thrown through the windshield. Annie, however, manages to buckle up, but still sustains injuries. Syracuse and Ondine, driving by, recognize the car. Syracuse screams and rushes at the medics as they load Annie onto a stretcher to take her to the hospital. Later, they find the girl in the hospital and learn that she's undergoing an immediate kidney transplant from Alex, who, by a stroke of luck, was a compatible match. Meanwhile, the unknown man meets Ondine in the hallway. He wonders why she speaks their language because neither of them belongs here. The sea spat her out, but this is not their world. The woman asks him to return home without her. The next morning, Annie wakes up and immediately asks where Ondine is. Syracuse reassures her that they'll see her soon. Sometime later, a cremation ceremony for Alex takes place. Maura scatters his ashes over the sea, regretting that this time she can't blame her ex-husband for everything. She asks him to take Annie, but demands that he get rid of Ondine, and she forces her husband to drink to Alex's soul. In a drunken state, Syracuse goes to the boat where Ondine is hiding and, calling her a Selkie, takes her out to sea where he demands that she return to her husband and sing her songs to him. He takes her to the foot of the lighthouse and continues to insist that she needs to leave. He leaves her there and prepares to sail away, believing that life isn't a fairy tale. People and Selkies can't be together. Ondine asks for a chance to say goodbye to Annie, but he sails away. As dusk falls, the log she's sitting on gives her silhouette the appearance of a woman with a tail. Waiting for nightfall, she jumps into the sea. In the morning, the priest wakes up a depressed Syracuse, who realizes he's made a big mistake. He brings Annie from the hospital to his home. The girl comforts him, saying that Ondine will come back because she left something here. Later, Annie watches TV, where the Icelandic band Sigur Rós is performing, and suddenly Syracuse recognizes the words. He realizes that Ondine was an ordinary woman and rushes to the lighthouse. At first, he can't find her anywhere and runs along the shore, shouting, but soon he sees a fire where Ondine is warming herself. At first, she says she's a sea creature who found her magical clothes and buried them so she could stay forever with the family she loves. But Syracuse demands the truth, and then Ondine admits that she was a courier delivering illegal substances from Romania. She was in a boat with a backpack full of substances when the police closed in. Her guard threw her into the water because he couldn't swim. She swam until she couldn't anymore, and then she drowned. But she got caught in Syracuse's net. The girl tells him her real name, Ioana. The fisherman takes her home where criminals are already waiting, having taken Annie hostage. Syracuse tries to fight them off, but he can't handle two armed men. The girl told him the story about the Selkie's clothing buried in the greenhouse, and the men demand to be shown the spot. Everyone heads to the greenhouse to dig up the goods, but they find nothing because Annie has hidden the Selkie's clothing elsewhere. Ondine promises to stay with Annie, and she admits that she hid the package in the lobster crate. Everyone heads to the boat, but when the criminals lift the basket, Annie reminds Ondine that she's a Selkie, and they are not. Ondine throws one of the villains overboard. He drowns while Syracuse throws the other Romanian into the water, disarming him. The arriving police arrest the criminal along with Ondine, who faces deportation unless she gains citizenship, or she could get married. Later, Annie goes to confession and says that her father's getting married soon, even though she wasn't a real Selkie. But you can't marry a seal, can you? In the final scenes, a girl in a white dress and a fisherman in a suit sail off on their boat for a honeymoon, bringing to life the fairy tale about the happiness of a human in a Selkie. That's where the movie ends. 1,000 years ago, the first settlers left Earth and formed the League of Free Worlds. Some got warm, sun-drenched planets, while others were fated to be born on a planet covered with impenetrable swamps. People built a model city there where order, prosperity, and total control reigned. Christie was among those who couldn't reconcile with such an existence, which landed her in prison. But since there is no death penalty on planet XT-59, a group of 10 prisoners is sentenced to lifelong exile in the swamps. If lucky, they might reach the Paradise Islands, but no one recalls such instances since the swamps are teeming with dangerous creatures. This time, as the prisoners were prepared for their last journey, the captain incapacitates one of the prisoners, his head shrouded in a sack, and orders him to move forward. The prisoner inquires about the security barrier and begins to move very cautiously. He miraculously avoids the hit from the security's invisible barrier, and the captain orders to deactivate the protection. Then, the captain reads the sentence and removes the sack from the prisoner's head, followed by an order to give the prisoners a metal box with supplies. They have an hour to set off, or the guards will kill them on the spot. One of the women goes into hysteria, claiming she's a tourist and innocent. She tries to run, but Christie catches and calms the unfortunate woman. The prisoner, freed from the sack, suggests that people introduce themselves. He is Irwin, but the initiative is intercepted by the formidable-looking Youst, nicknamed the Polar Wolf, who knows these swamps well as it's not his first exile. The wolf wants to know everything about each member of the team, but their acquaintance is interrupted by the appearance of a dangerous local creature living underground, called the Pagan. The creature senses vibration and moves towards it, dragging its prey underground. Christie declares that she intends to only listen to Irwin. Youst reminds her of his superiority, to which Irwin proposes to divide the supplies and opens the box. He manages to grab only a knife when the others pounce on the box with supplies. The wolf again reminds everyone that he's the boss, but Irwin refuses to listen to a prisoner and announces his departure to the Paradise Islands. Christie joins him, but first, they want their share of the supplies. The wolf's henchman tries to claim rights over Christie. Then Irwin puts a knife to his throat, reminding that any attempt of the prisoners to destroy each other will result in them being immediately shot on the spot. So, the wolf has no choice but to give the pair their share of supplies. Additionally, Irwin requests the metal box itself in exchange for a portion of food, and the wolf agrees to give it away. The wolf orders his group to prepare for the journey when Christie asks Irwin to help the helpless tourist. But he refuses. That woman is already dead, even though she doesn't know it. Irwin explains to Christie that she should go first because she is lighter than him, and he will be able to pull her out if she falls into the swamp. At that time, a voice from the fortress commands the prisoners to lave the shore. The wolf leads his team forward. Irwin and Christie tie a heavy box with ropes and also set off. Suddenly, a shot is fired from the fortress. People hide behind the rocks, and Irwin realizes that he was the intended target. He forces Christie to crawl out of the dangerous square. Along the way, the girl notices small, crawling creatures, but Irwin assures her of their harmlessness, suggesting they could be their food, which disgusts Christie. Soon, the pair reach a relatively safe place and confirm that Wolf's team is following their trail. Watching how Irwin calculates everything in advance and can find a solution to any problem, Christie worries, trying to understand who the man was before his exile. The girl doubts the existence of Paradise Islands, to which Irwin rightly remarks that then they wouldn't have tried to kill him. After all, the guards would have been sure that he would definitely die. And although it's his first time in the swamp, he is confident that he can find the right way. Meanwhile, the captain is reprimanded by the president for the advisor still being alive. Sergeant Matthias, who was the disguised prisoner, failed to eliminate the advisor. The captain reassures the president, stating the swamps are impassable. Meanwhile, Christie and Irwin find a small stream of clean water, and the girl washes her face, pondering her misfortune. Suddenly, Irwin asks Christie to freeze, but she thinks he's decided to take advantage of her. However, it turns out Irwin spotted the Pagan, which suddenly emerged from under the ground. Christie grabs a knife and cuts off part of the creature. After that, Christie treats Irwin's wound while sharing that she ended up in prison for standing up to an inspector who tried to force her into intimacy. At that moment, the wolf's group appears from behind the rocks. The man intends to take back the metal box, but Irwin takes the part of the creature cut off by Christie and uses it as an electric whip. The wolf realizes the situation is bad and decides to let them go. The pair leaves, but the wolf stubbornly follows their tracks. Erwin heard that on the rotten shore there's a place where former prisoners live, and the wolf is their leader. He follows them, hoping that the pair will first fall into a swamp trap. Erwin notices the tips of the pagan sticking out of the ground and orders Christy to lie down, be silent, and not move. They do so, watching as a gigantic root of the pagan appears over the wolf's group, dragging several people underground. Meanwhile, the president again contacts the captain, who assures that he has taken the necessary measures and his man is on the trail. In the swamps, Erwin and Christy stop for the night. The man is ready to talk about himself if the girl solves his riddle about the cost of a chocolate bar. But while he states the conditions of the riddle, Christy falls asleep. The girl wakes up to a strange sound and sees a wave of creatures approaching them. She tries to run, but Erwin throws her into the box, climbs in himself, and closes the lid. The pair waits out the invasion, and although the box's lid is eventually breached, the people remain unharmed. Finally, silence falls, and they emerge outside. Christy's first question is about the answer to the riddle, and knowing it, she calms down. Now the box is no longer needed, and the pair throws it away. Soon they reach the liquid part of the swamp. Meanwhile, the remaining part of the wolf's group follows their trail, but Layla, realizing they might lose the couple, runs after Erwin and Christy. The wolf rushes after her and falls into a swamp pit. Here Layla slips up, saying that Erwin is a former presidential advisor and knows best how to act. Nevertheless, one of the prisoners, Jan, helps the wolf out. In the evening, Erwin sets up camp, forces Christy to eat raw tadpoles, and confesses that he was the president's advisor, but his conscience tormented him. He collected a lot of different information and wanted to tell the public about it. The authorities realized they couldn't get rid of him quietly and sent him to the swamps. But he managed to launch a virus into the control system, which can only be turned off knowing the code, and only he has the code. So, after the system's collapse, free people will be able to build their new free city management system. Christy reminds him that then they will definitely be looking for him, but the man is confident that by that time, they will already be on the islands. Meanwhile, in the city, the system begins to collapse. The communications satellites fail first. In the morning, Layla and those who left the wolf encounter wild people on their way. Hearing their screams, Christy curses whoever invented this method of punishment. Erwin admits that he did it because he thought it was humane. Christy breaks down and berates Erwin, urging him to burn himself so no one can learn his code. He starts screaming, calling the savages to fight to die, but no one comes out. Then Christy confesses that she was offered freedom for his death. Meanwhile, the wolf finds those hiding among the rocks of his group. To save herself, Layla tells about the offer she received to kill the advisor, after which a ship will fly for her. The wolf orders to find the sensor on her body. The girl runs away and dies in the web of a dangerous swamp fungus. Seeing that their spy is dead, the captain arms Sergeant Matthias and sends him on the advisor's trail. Meanwhile, another man from the wolf's group dies, and then Jan catches up with the couple, and distracted by him, Erwin falls into a trap to the wolf, who intends to exchange the advisor for freedom. Erwin, tied up, tries to persuade Christy to run, but she suddenly kisses him. The wolf forces Erwin to stand, but he mocks the prisoner, and the wolf has to carry Erwin on his back. Meanwhile, Sergeant Matthias's group lands in the ruins of the old prison where wild criminals live. Soon, the wolf's group also gets there. Leaving the tied advisor and Christy aside, the wolf goes to negotiate with the sergeant. But while they are agreeing, Erwin frees himself and escapes. The wolf promises to find him but gets shot by the sergeant, after which Matthias finds Christy and Jan, and killing the latter leads the girl forward. Erwin confronts Matthias and demands to release Christy in exchange for himself. The military agrees but shoots a tranquilizer, hitting Christy, and himself receives a knife in the back from the fatally wounded wolf. Erwin thanks the dying man, who advises not to go to the Paradise Islands because they don't exist. Then he drinks poison to avoid suffering. Later, Erwin, carrying Christy in his arms, reaches the sea, and the advisor realizes that the Paradise Islands are rafts made of plants, and they can cross the strait on them. Meanwhile, the captain loses contact with Matthias and realizes that further search for the advisor is useless, but he sends the last combat drone after him. At this time, Christy comes to her senses and realizes that their island is gradually sinking. The prisoner with them, Job, hears this and goes into the water to save the couple. Soon they hear the sound of an approaching drone, but the drone fails to reach them and falls into the water, thereby proving that Erwin's virus worked and the city's control system is destroyed. Their joy is overshadowed by a cliff appearing ahead. The couple wraps themselves in their plant-made island and miraculously survives a gigantic waterfall. Soon, they reach the shore, where a secret bunker is set up in case of the president's escape, designed and built by Erwin. But he doesn't know the entire code. The last figure was entered by the president. There are only 2 attempts, so guessing it is impossible. Then Christy remembers the riddle about the chocolate bar and, knowing the president's answer to it, which Erwin also posed to him, suggests entering the number he named. And the bunker opens. But then it turns out that the hidden spaceship there is single-seated. Erwin insists that Christy should fly alone, but she refuses because she loves him. In the last scenes of the movie, the voices of Christy and Erwin are heard, making it clear that they somehow managed to squeeze into the spaceship together. Thanks to their rescue, the League of Free Worlds learned the truth about the planet and destroyed the remnants of the total control system. But 10 years later, a new system was established on planet XT-59, much more cruel than the previous one. The movie is simple and at times imperfect, but it's truthful and unexpectedly relevant because no one can bring freedom to the people from the outside. Everything is achieved only through one's own efforts and by taking responsibility for oneself and no one else. Hello everyone! Today we're going to be talking about a science fiction film called Inuyashiki. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Ichiro is a middle-class man who bought a new house for his family, but they don't seem to be very appreciative of his efforts, complaining how it's smaller than all the houses nearby. The father bought sushi for the family to celebrate, but they don't want any takeouts and instead goes to a restaurant without their old man. Ichiro has no choice but to enjoy the celebration by himself. At work, his boss complains about his new project that's trying to sell energy drinks, which is making the company lose a lot of money. Ichiro apologizes publicly while his manager yells at him in front of all his co-workers. He goes home after a tough day only to see some thug stealing from a man similar to himself. Ichiro turns around in fear only to be spotted by his daughter, who blames him for being a coward. While sitting outside his house, Ichiro finds a stray dog, abandoned by her master, walking towards him. Her name is Hanako, and the main character feels a kinship with her right away. The wife sees her husband with the dog and immediately tells him to get rid of her. She hands him a report about his recent medical examination, which requires him to do further testings. Ichiro receives a terrible news from the doctor, who tells him that he has stage 4 cancer and only about 3 months to live. He tries calling his wife about the news, but she chooses to ignore him. Ichiro calls his daughter, but she also ignores his phone call. At dinner time, he tries telling his family about his medical condition, but they're too engulfed in themselves and continues to blame the father for every little mishap. The wife demands her husband to get rid of the dog while paying no attention to the pain in her husband's eyes. Ichiro walks his pet out into the streets and wonders if his family will even cry for him after hearing the terrible news. He apologizes to Hanako and tries to leave her behind, but she continues to follow him everywhere he goes. After failing to leave his loyal companion, Ichiro realizes that Hanako is the only thing in this world that cares about him and apologizes profusely for abandoning his friend. He sees another man named Hiro contemplating while sitting in the park, and both of them look up as they see a bright light heading this way. An object hits them with blinding speed, and Ichiro loses consciousness while strange creatures surround him as Hanako barks continuously. He wakes up in the morning, finding his dog beside him, and surprisingly, he somehow regained perfect vision without his glasses. Ichiro goes home for breakfast, only to find that he cannot taste any of the food and feels extremely thirsty while drinking water from the fountain. He goes to his room, only to see that smoke is coming out from his left hand. It then turns into a large rifle and shoots what appears to be the soup he drank from earlier. His whole body begins transforming and opening everywhere, showing mechanical parts underneath the skin. Ichiro manages to pull himself together as his wife walks into the room. It turns out that Ichiro's daughter, Mary, goes to the same class as Hiro, the man who was with Ichiro last night. He goes to his friend, Choco, and decides to show him the power he obtained from the encounter last night by shooting a bird from the distance with his fingers. Hiro then takes his friend to an underground parking where he demonstrates the ability to control cars with his mind and proceeds to reveal his mechanical body from underneath. At the same time, Ichiro leaves work and sees an injured pigeon on the floor. He holds the animal in compassion and surprisingly is able to heal it to full health and sends it flying again. He hears another voice of suffering from afar and quickly arrives to the hospital where a boy is close to dying from a terminal illness. Ichiro puts his hand on the boy and manages to bring him back to health, just like the pigeon. Seeing the mother reunite with her son, he goes off in happiness, knowing that he saved someone's life. On the other side, Hiro brings his friend to the bullies and demands that they apologize and give back the money they took. He grabs onto the bully's arm and hurts him until he gets exactly what he wants. Hiro points his finger towards the man, and just before he kills, Choco stops him, telling him it's enough. His apparent bravery catches the attention of a girl named Shion, who confesses to him in the hallway. Hiro thanks her for the compliments and walks away with a smile. We learn that his mother is divorced because Hiro's father left her for another woman. Even though she was betrayed by her ex-husband, she still shows care for his health and wants Hiro to spend time with his father. He goes to their house and spends time eating dinner with their family, but you can see that their happiness only infuriates Hiro from within, as he believes that it was stolen from his mother. While playing with his half-brother, Hiro points his finger towards the family and hesitates about pulling the trigger. He eventually stops as he looks at his father and realizes that he still cares for the man despite what he's done. Hiro walks home alone and hears all the happiness from the families nearby. He breaks into one of the houses and proceeds to shoot everyone inside. Ichiro hears this from the hospital after saving more people and rushes to the house where he finds the young girl with a bullet hole on her head. He tries saving her with his power, but realizes that it only works on living creatures. He walks in the living room and sees Hiro standing over the dead bodies. Ichiro recognizes the man from the park earlier, but Hiro attacks him and sends him flying before he can say a single word. He recovers unharmed and rushes out of the house, only to see Hiro flying off into the distance. Choco meets with Hiro and suspects his friend is responsible for the murders that occurred last night, since they all died with gunshots but no bullets. Hiro admits that he killed the family, but justifies this believing that he's a god now. He says that strangers die every day no matter what happens, and they shouldn't feel sorry for the people that they don't even know. Choco refuses to accept this and backs off in fear. He tells Hiro that they can't be friends anymore and runs away from the murderer. Hiro goes home to his mother and to his surprise, she tells her son that he must live with his father from now on. She explains that she has inoperable cancer and the doctors told her that she won't live much longer. Hiro embraces his mother and cries while swearing that he would never allow her to die. Ichiro goes home and tells his family that he was demoted by the company. The wife yells at him, worrying about their mortgage, while the daughter becomes angry at his father for his incompetence. Ichiro laments about his inability to protect his own family and doubts that he's able to stop the murderers and help others. Suddenly, he hears Choco's voice, praying that someone can stop his best friend from killing more people. Ichiro realizes that he has to stop doubting himself and resolves to use his powers to stop Hiro from murdering others. He transforms into his robot form and flies towards the sky while carrying Hanako with him. Ichiro arrives to the park and meets Choco. They talk about what happened on that night, and Choco speculates that aliens must have reconstructed both Ichiro and Hiro. He thinks that they both must have the same abilities and decides to train Ichiro based on what he saw Hiro is able to do. They go to a junkyard and Ichiro tries shooting a tin can with his hand. Let's just say that the old man has a lot of training to do before he can even come close to beating his rival. On the other side, Hiro goes to see the doctor with his mother, only to find out that the cancer has fully disappeared from her body, most likely due to her son healing her with his powers. They walk home together, and Hiro tries to convince his mother to enjoy life and go on vacations. He promises that he will make her happy, as her life has been difficult from the beginning. Their happiness don't last, however, when they're visited by a group of police officers demanding to question Hiro about the murders. He runs off immediately while his mother screams for his name. Hiro tosses the police officers around like rag dolls and sprints onto the parking lot. He uses his powers to kill 3 of the officers, while others fire at him with no effects. Hiro jumps down from the stairway and proceeds to fly away from the area. The news of his escape travels quickly through the media, and Hiro quickly becomes a fugitive with nowhere to hide. Luckily, he runs into Shion and she decides to take him in despite his current status. We learn that Shion is living with her grandma, the only relative that she has left. Her parents died of illness years ago, and she doesn't think that she can live long either. Meanwhile, Ichiro finally makes some progress on his training, but gets tired easily from all the exertions. He becomes thirsty again and grabs the energy drink from his company. Shoko speculates that the water must fuel their bodies as they become very thirsty after using their weapons. Ichiro begins feeling pain from his body and shoots out the liquid just like he did last time with the soup. Shoko quickly realizes that it may be the sodium contents that's causing his body to malfunction, and they may be able to use this to their advantage later. At night, Hiro watches the news about his mother, only to see that everyone is blaming her for what her son did. She apologizes repeatedly, but receives no sympathy from anyone. He falls into tears, realizing that the crimes he committed is now being paid by the person he loves the most in this world. The news then informs him that they found his mother dead in her apartment. Apparently, she killed herself after being pressured by the media. Hiro goes into shock at this realization. He begins reading the comments on the video, only to see everyone cursing at his mother's name. Hiro becomes enraged and uses his powers to hack into the commenters' computers. He begins shooting everyone through their screens, causing widespread mortality across the nation as the people fall dead after looking at their devices. Shion finds Hiro unable to sleep at night and tries to comfort him, but the man tells her that he's responsible for killing all those people. He transforms in front of her and tries to scare her away, but the girl refuses to believe that the man she loves is a killer. Hiro rushes her outside and takes her to the sky, asking Shion if this frightens her, but the only thing that the girl is scared of is if he left. He realizes that she's the only person left in this world who cares about him and promises to protect her and stay with her forever. Hiro is finally able to sleep, and Shion smiles and says that he's very human after all. She goes to the kitchen and feels something beside her. Shion turns around only to see an army of soldiers pointing their guns at her. Hiro sees this and grabs her immediately while the soldiers fire continuously at his body. He turns around and retaliates with fury, killing every one of them. When everything settles, he notices that Shion is already dead with multiple gun wounds on her body. Hiro cries at his friend's death and resolves to kill everyone in the country. Ichiro sees the news reports about the recent murders and warns his family to turn off their phones, but none of them listens and proceeds to go out despite the dangers. Mary meets up with her friends while they climb to the top of a high-rise to enjoy the sceneries. Hiro begins broadcasting himself on every single network and tells everyone his intentions of destroying the country in order to avenge his family. No one takes him seriously until he begins shooting at the masses and people are dropping dead everywhere. Everybody panics and runs in chaos, but there is nowhere to hide from his attacks. Ichiro manages to hijack the signal, and Choco tells everyone to throw away their phones in order to prevent the attacks. Without any way to reach the masses, Hiro decides to attack humanity directly by firing numerous missiles at the city and causing explosions everywhere. Ichiro finds Hiro and tries to convince him to stop, but his words fail to reach the young man as he begins chasing Ichiro through the sky. They go through the buildings in the city, and Hiro follows the old man closely. He begins shooting a barrage of missiles, but Ichiro manages to evade them as they explode right behind him. They fly through an underground tunnel, and Ichiro nearly gets hit by the upcoming traffics. As they fly closer to Mary, the father begins hearing her plead for help as her building was struck by one of the missiles. The old man rushes towards his daughter, but gets attacked by Hiro from behind, which stunts his flight system and forces him to crash land on the side of a building. Ichiro tries shooting at the man, but Hiro dodges the attacks and kicks him through the building. They crash into a helicopter and knocks it towards the walls, causing it to explode. They land on a rooftop and Ichiro continues to beg Hiro to stop killing. The young man takes out a bottle of water and tries to recharge, but Ichiro destroys it. Hiro charges at him and takes the water from the old man. He drinks the whole bottle and continues to fire missiles, sending Ichiro flying into the sky. Hiro chases the old man as they fly further into the atmosphere. He fires more missiles at Ichiro, who gets pushed by the explosion into outer space. Hiro punches him and takes this opportunity to grab the old man, planning to finish the fight with a final attack. To his surprise, instead of firing missiles, he shot out the water he drank earlier, which turns out to be energy drink replaced by Ichiro. Hiro falls back as his body malfunctions. Ichiro transforms his arm into a rifle and shoots numerous projectiles at Hiro, sending him flying towards Earth with the explosions. The old man flies towards the building where his daughter is at and sees Mary lying motionless on the ground. He tries everything in order to resurrect her and manages to bring back her breath. They embrace each other as tears fall from the old man's eyes. Suddenly, he gets kicked from the side, which sends him flying to the walls. It turns out that Hiro survived the fall from earlier and returns to take his vengeance. He learns that Mary is the old man's daughter and begins attacking her, shooting her stomach as Ichiro interferes. Hiro punches the old man around like a rag doll and continues to beat him in front of his daughter. He grabs Mary and takes her to the edge of the building. Hiro wants the father to experience the same despair which he feels every moment and throws the daughter off the building. Seeing his family about to get killed, Ichiro charges all his energy and flies towards Hiro. He crashes into the man and breaks off his arm while flying towards his daughter. Ichiro charges downwards and sees that Mary is still falling. He reaches out on the girl and manages to catch her right before hitting the ground. Mary wakes up after being healed by her father and realizes that her old man is a superhero. She sees him fly off as he rushes to save as many people as he could. Although the government has confirmed Hiro's death, they haven't really found his body on site, only shards of metals of unknown origins. Ichiro continues to have dinner with his family like everything is normal, but his daughter now sees that her father is a true hero. Choco goes home and to his surprise sees that Hiro is still alive, but missing an arm after the fight. He's glad to see that his friend didn't die and offers him to play the newest video game. Choco turns around after finding the game, only to see that Hiro has left, knowing that his presence would only endanger his best friend. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a fantasy film called Dragon Wars. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. Every 500 years, a woman is born with the spiritual energy to transform a serpent into a celestial dragon. The creature that possesses this power can determine humanity's fate by either destroying or saving the world. Somewhere in the city of Los Angeles, the police are examining the sudden appearance of a giant trail, seemingly caused by a large creature. Ethan is a reporter who's also here to investigate the situation, but the government agents refuse to answer any questions and tells him to leave immediately. However, the man notices something strange as he looks into the field and sees what appears to be a piece of scale buried inside the ground. Apparently, Ethan has seen this before when he was a child, and he begins recollecting the memories as he stares into a strange medallion that he wears. 15 years ago, Ethan went to a local antique store, accompanying his father as the man tries to sell a blade to the store owner named Jack. The boy looks through the items and sees a mysterious box unlocking itself after sensing his presence. The box opens and reveals a giant piece of scale that emanates an aura towards the boy. The store owner perceives this and begins having a heart attack. But when the father tries to call the ambulance, Jack tells the man to buy a medicine from the neighboring shop instead. Ethan's father tells the boy to look after the old man and runs off quickly, but it turns out that Jack faked everything in order to speak to the boy alone. He tells Ethan that there are giant serpents called imugis that live in the heavens, and every 500 years, one of the serpents is awarded for its good deeds and turned into a celestial dragon. For this to occur, the creature needs a magical object called the Yuiju, but the evil serpent Viraki and his followers have tried for a long time to steal this item. 5 centuries ago, the heaven decided to hide the Yuiju by sending it to a city in Korea and guarded by its best warriors Haram and his master Buchan. But the evil serpent also knew the location of this magical item and plans to steal it one day. The local lord's wife gave birth to a girl named Naren, and the one destined to be the holder of the Yuiju with a giant birthmark on her shoulder. When the girl becomes 20 years of age, the Yuiju would form inside her, and the evil serpent would appear once again. Naren soon becomes a beautiful woman, and she begins falling in love with Haram, who shares the affection as well. The master shows Haram the good Imugi, who's destined to become a celestial dragon, and the young man looks at the giant creature in shock as it swims inside the waters. Buchan also gives the man the medallion that only the protector of Yuiju wears, which can protect him from harm if his life is in danger. Eventually, the evil serpent brings all its followers to the village in search for the girl, and the army begins shooting numerous bombs at the people, causing tremendous damage. They charge at the city and kills all the men one by one, as the people are no match for their dragons and magic. They capture all the women and looks through every one of them, trying to find the girl with the giant birthmark on her shoulder. The army soon arrives at the Lord's house and kills Narin's father in front of her, causing the girl to run out and mourn for her dying parents. The soldier rips open her clothing, discovering her true identity, and forcefully takes her away from her home. Luckily, the master flies in and fights the army with his magic, giving Hiram the chance to save the girl. The two run into hiding, and the man tells Narin the truth about her destiny. The master manages to escape the fight after being wounded, but finds the medallion on the ground with his pupil nowhere in sight. Hiram tries to run away with Narin instead of bringing her to the good Imugi, and the evil serpent Baraki chases them closely behind. The creature corners them on a cliff, and the two decide to jump and fall into the oceans, killing themselves in the process. The store owner gives Ethan the protector's medallion and reveals that he's actually the reincarnation of Buchan, and the boy used to be Hiram, the warrior that he raised. This is their second chance in fulfilling the prophecy, and the boy must find a girl named Sarah who also has the giant birthmark and bring her to the Grand Cave. After remembering the girl's name, Ethan goes to his friend Bruce and tells him to find the girl, as she's likely to be related to the giant trails. But the friend tells Ethan that they need more details, as there are probably thousands of women in the city with the same name. Meanwhile, Sarah sees the news on TV about the gigantic landmarks and suddenly becomes wary about her safety, running home even without saying goodbye to her friend. She's clearly subconsciously aware of this danger and tries her best to protect herself by looking through a book about ancient prophecies. Her friend Brandy goes to her home and is shocked to see that Sarah has put up numerous paper talismans in the house to ward off evil. The girl tries to comfort Sarah and tells her that she's only imagining the danger, but this doesn't help at all, as she can't shake the instinctual fear inside her heart. Sarah's worry turns out to be valid, as the giant serpent has appeared in the city looking for the Yuichu, destroying everything on its path. The girl begins having nightmares and waking up at night. She feels an intense pain coming from her birthmark and calls the ambulance to take her to the hospital. Brandy tries to look for her friend after finding out that Sarah was hospitalized, but the nurse refuses to let her visit right now as they pass the visiting hours. With no other choice, Brandy goes to Sarah's house to pack some clothing for her friend, but suddenly feels the ground shaking from the outside. The girl runs out of the house, only to see the giant serpent in front of her and screams in fear. Baraki bites her before she can escape and tosses her into the pool, leaving her to die. The next day, Ethan receives the report that a woman was killed inside a house by what the neighbors claim to be a giant snake. He immediately heads towards the location, fearing that Sarah may have died already. When he arrives at the scene, he realizes that the girl is not the one he was looking for, and learns from the neighbor that Sarah was taken to a hospital before the attack. He rushes towards the location to find the girl, but is stopped at the front desk, who tells him that Sarah was put into quarantine for a wound on her shoulder that may cause infections. Ethan tries to look for another way in, and meets a doctor who's a big fan of the news reporter and helps him find the girl right away. He sees the woman sitting on the bed and tells her that he believes in the danger that she's feeling, and explains that they must leave this place as the monster is nearby. Suddenly, they feel the whole building shake violently as the giant serpent has tracked them to the hospital already. The doctor rushes in and tells the two to leave right away, as they're in great danger. Ethan takes the girl towards the exit, as the doctor slowly transforms into Jack, who was watching over them from the very beginning. They run to the car driven by Bruce, and the man hits the gas pedal right away after seeing the monster appear in the garage, chasing after them as it destroys everything in sight. They rush out of the hospital and manages to escape quickly as the creature charges out one step behind and roars in frustration towards his prey. Before they can catch their breath, Bruce hits someone with the car and stops immediately. But it turns out that the man is a servant of Baraki and plans to take Sarah back to his master. The two tries everything they can to stop the general, but their attacks are useless against the man's armor. Luckily, the man was hit by a car before the girl was taken, and the driver takes them away quickly from danger. The woman drops off the two after confirming that they're not hurt, and begins transforming back into Jack, showing that the old man continues to help them in their perilous journey. Sarah is confused about everything that's happening and questions the visions that she keeps on seeing in her dreams, doubting her own sanity. In order to find out about the truth behind her past, Ethan suggests that they go to a psychology professor of his who specializes in extracting repressed memories. He promises to keep her safe as they share a kiss on the beach, but Ethan realizes that her destiny is to die if she's really the holder of the Yuiju. On the other side, the continuous attacks in the city has caught the government's attention, and they begin to suspect that Sarah is somehow responsible for the monster's appearance. The mission leader realizes that they may have to terminate the girl if they're not able to contain the situation, as the creature seems to be looking for her. At the same time, Baraki's general begins summoning more of the serpent's followers and monsters into the world using numerous ancient scrolls, and they prepare to take Sarah by any means necessary. The government manages to track down the location of the giant serpent and sends an army of special forces to terminate the beast. They head inside the cave of the monster and seize the enormous creature appearing in front of them. The soldiers quickly retreat in fear and begin shooting at Baraki, but their attacks are useless as they continue to run from the monster. However, the serpent's army arrives on the other side and forces the soldiers into a corner. The general summons his magic towards the man and destroys them in a single attack. Meanwhile, Ethan's professor is trying to extract the suppressed memories from Sarah's mind, and eventually, the girl begins seeing her childhood and then further into her past life as well. Her spiritual power begins awakening as her memories return, surrounding her in glowing lights as Ethan watches in amazement. Sarah recovers from the experience, but her powers have also alerted Baraki to their location, forcing them to run immediately away from the house. The two drives away quickly as the giant snake destroys the house and chases them close behind, tearing up the entire street in the process. Luckily, they manage to lose the monster in the residential areas, and Ethan calls his friend to arrange a helicopter as he realizes that they can no longer be safe on the ground. They meet up with Bruce in a restaurant who gives them supplies and tells them that the helicopter is on top of the news building. But the giant serpent manages to locate them once again and begins destroying the entire building to capture the girl. They run quickly away from the building as the monster chases them from behind. Before they can be captured, the police officers fire at the giant creature and distract it long enough for them to escape temporarily. They continue running towards the news building as the monster chases after them, destroying everything on its path and sending cars flying in the air. The people in the city panic and runs in fear while the creature causes numerous explosions, resulting in tremendous damage in the area. The two runs inside the news building and eventually makes it to the rooftop where the helicopter is waiting for them. But the creature has noticed their whereabouts and begins climbing to the roof as well. The helicopter tries to take off, but the serpent launches and grabs onto the aircraft, forcing Ethan to jump out with Sarah before it smashes the carrier through the air and onto the ground. Dark clouds begin covering the sky as Baraki roars in victory and stares directly at the couple, planning to devour them to acquire the power of the heavens. Luckily, they're saved when the US military arrives and begins shooting furiously at the creature with a barrage of missiles and bullets, giving them the chance to escape from the building. The serpent tries to fight back and destroys multiple choppers, but the army's combined firepower manages to knock down the giant beast and sends it tumbling to the ground. They continue to shoot relentlessly as the creature screams in pain, but what they don't realize is that an army of dragon is approaching quickly to the city. The monsters attack the choppers by shooting out multiple fireballs, causing huge explosions as the aircrafts are forced to retreat. The ground troops of the monsters arrive as well and begins launching numerous bombs at the police, causing explosions to engulf the area. The military responds by mobilizing armored vehicles towards the creatures and its army of darkness led by the serpent's general. The two armies march closer towards each other and begins a massive battle as the monsters charge towards the US military. The tank fires at the army and begins killing the creatures, but the enemy also retaliates by shooting numerous bombs at the vehicles, causing tremendous damage. Meanwhile, Ethan manages to escape the building with Sarah, but they run into the government agents who claims to be here to help them and take them away from the chaos. The agents bring them to an underground facility, and the senior officer reveals that he knows about the ancient legend. He plans on killing the girl to end this madness, even if it means that the creatures will come back 500 years later. Before the man can fire the gun, the other agent shoots his partner as he realizes that in order to save humanity permanently, the girl must live. He gives them the car keys and tells Ethan to protect Sarah until they can change the fate of the world. Ethan drives the girl towards the borders and plans to escape into Mexico, but Sarah claims that their actions are useless because Baraki will track her down wherever she goes. Before they can finish their conversation, the dragons attack their car with fireballs, causing them to flip over and crash onto the road. Ethan slowly loses consciousness as the monsters begin surrounding them. When the main character wakes up, he realizes that he's tied up to a pole in the deserts, surrounded by the army of darkness. They bring the girl towards the altar and ties her up to the table, preparing her to be sacrificed to the evil serpent. The general and the army chants Baraki's name as they open the massive door, releasing the monster so that it may devour the girl. The giant serpent moves closer to the woman and towers over everyone, while Sarah screams in fear at the sight of this monstrosity. Ethan screams the woman's name hopelessly, which awakens the medallion on his chest, summoning the thunders from the heavens, which concentrates the energy into a large shockwave that stuns the entire army and turns them into dust. The giant serpent recovers from the explosion and attacks them with anger, knocking Ethan away from the girl. Before he can devour Sarah, another Imugi charges towards it and knocks it to the ground. It carries Baraki by its jaws and throws the monster away from the couple. The two giant monsters roar at each other, and Baraki launches towards the other Imugi, biting its neck and throwing the giant serpent onto the floor. Sarah realizes that she must fulfill her destiny, as it's the only way this whole thing can end. She walks towards the serpents and summons the Yuiju from her body into the sky. Baraki tries to grab the glowing orb, but Sarah sends it the other way and the good Imugi swallows the energy at this opportunity. The evil serpent sees this and begins attacking his foe. But the good Imugi transforms and sheds the skin on his body, finally turning into a celestial dragon. It screams furiously and grabs Baraki, slamming the serpent onto the ground. The monster recovers and begins attacking the dragon once more, but is no match for the celestial creature as it gets thrown to the floor once again. The dragon flies towards the sky and Baraki tries to grab onto its tail, causing both of them to launch into the air. The good Imugi turns around and strikes the serpent by its neck, tossing the monster downwards as it crashes into the ground. The dragon then charges a massive fireball and shoots it right inside Baraki's mouth, causing the serpent to burn from the inside and eventually turning to dust. The dragon flies back towards Ethan and spits out the Yuiju, which causes Sarah's body to evaporate into a glowing aura that fuses with the magical orb. The celestial dragon roars towards the heavens and grabs onto the Yuiju. It then launches towards the sky and slowly vanishes into the clouds, as it sheds tears of sympathy for Ethan's loss. Jack appears behind the man and tells him that he did the right thing, before vanishing as well to the other world. Ethan says goodbye to his master and begins walking towards the desert, into a new future that he's created for mankind. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like my video, please press like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. A man wakes up in an unfamiliar place, not understanding where he is, how he got there, and where his phone is. He tries to reach out to someone, but a voice from behind the door advises him to be silent and calm down. An unseen interlocutor informs the man that he has been drugged, and he will feel very unwell for the next few days. But now, it's time for him to work, and he bids him farewell. Joe attempts to make sense of everything that has happened when he hears a small slot opening on the door, through which several food packets fall. Joe rushes to the door and asks the invisible guard for help. He has a pregnant wife at home who needs his assistance, so he needs to get out of here as soon as possible. He is told several times to step away from the door and not to reach his hand into the slot, but the man doesn't listen, resulting in a severe blow to his wrist. He cries, repeating that he doesn't deserve this and shouldn't be here. Later, Joe binds his wrist with his own tie and explores the strange place. He picks up the food and a small water bottle, but just as he's about to try the dubious meal, a siren starts blaring, followed by the voice of the Malord Corporation's AI welcoming him to a training program where he will become the best version of himself. Joe asks for information, but his neighbor advises him to keep quiet. His questions will remain unanswered anyway. A countdown to midnight begins, so Joe needs to prepare for his last hours of rest. The man doesn't understand what this means and tries to find out his interlocutor's name, but the interlocutor is surprised. Do they even have names here? The next minute, screams from people behind the walls start to reach Joe, telling him to be quiet and let them rest. The unseen interlocutor advises Joe to accept that this place is Malord, and now he should try to get some sleep because tomorrow will be the longest day of his life. Joe sits against the wall when suddenly a melodic whistle is heard, followed by a man's voice begging not to do it and promising to exceed the plan tomorrow. However, he seems to be beaten and dragged away somewhere. Joe covers his ears to avoid hearing the unfortunate man's voice and the AI's voice that reassures Joe that everything happening is meant to restore his peace of mind. Finally, the sun rises over the enclosure. The same whistle sounds, and a male voice congratulates Joe on the beautiful day and reminds him that the cameras must be kept clean. Otherwise, he will face punishment. At this time, the neighbor's voice speaks again, advising him to obey the orders and calling the nighttime incident a motivational speech to which he will soon become accustomed. Joe gathers some scarce trash and tosses it into a foul-smelling hole in the floor, covered by a small hatch, and there he notices something strange under his feet and, pulling on a strand, discovers that it's hair, beneath which a human's skull can be discerned. Joe screams in horror, but the neighbor knows that many people have died here, so Joe will have to get used to it. The neighbor reminds him of the contract he signed when he joined the company. Mallard gives this to everyone, but few read the fine print all the way to the end. So everything has its price. The sooner he gets into the rhythm, the easier his days will be. He just needs to do his work. At that moment, the AI voice kicks in. Joe interrupts it, shouting that he worked for the corporation for 10 years and demands to be released immediately, to which Mallard announces that a qualification enhancement seminar begins today. His productivity has declined recently, and now he has the opportunity to rectify it. Joe was once an exemplary employee, but he gradually stopped appreciating Mallard and everything she gave him. So now he has a new job that will last from 6 in the morning until 10 at night. During this time, he must turn the mill. 1 point for a complete rotation. His daily quota is 50 rotations. Do less, and he will be punished. But Mallard's motto is, enough is not good enough. He must strive to keep his position, salary, corporate apartment, and his life. Mallard wishes him success. Joe tries to persuade the AI to release him, but the neighbor advises not to waste his strength. At the moment, he needs to survive, and for that, he must work. And Joe gets to work. At first, it's very difficult for him, but he pushes through, and it starts to move. Mallard congratulates him on his first rotation, suggesting a virtual toast for his first victory. Joe pushes the mill, listening to the corporation's advertisements. Finally, the signal for the end of the work sounds, and Mallard congratulates him on completing his first day of self-improvement work. He exceeded the quota, which is very good. At night, Joe hears women's screams as Mallard announces another dismissal. Later, the neighbor, learning that Joe doubled the quota, advises him not to maintain such a pace. Joe can't understand the point. If he doesn't meet the quota, he's punished, but if he exceeds it and is last among all, it means death. To which the neighbor advises not to tell everyone about his quota. They're not friends, and the neighbor will always try to outdo him. They all have one thing in common. They climbed the corporate ladder, receiving many bonuses from the company, and seemingly reached the top. But, alas. Suddenly, Joe starts talking about his wife and the future son they had long awaited. And now, he's here. To which the neighbor advises him to work as well as he can. It's the only way to survive here. But overdoing it is not an option. A new workday begins. Joe pushes the mill and remembers how he and his wife inspected their new home, and he promised to work even harder to pay for it. The workday ends when there's a knock on Joe's door, and he's ordered to remove all of his clothes. He becomes scared but complies. After undressing, he steps out of the door and finds himself under a stream of water. After quickly washing himself, he returns to his chamber. The next day arrives, and the weather outside is significantly hotter, causing Joe to quickly become exhausted. He asks his neighbor what this mill is and what they are all doing here. The neighbor responds that they produce nothing, so the place is empty of purpose or meaning. Soon, Joe runs out of water and tries to call out to the guard, but the guard advises him to collect his urine and drink it, filtered through his sneakers. Joe is absolutely reluctant to do so, and the invisible interlocutor laughs at him, saying that Mallard knows what he needs. Here, he will be pushed to his limits, and Mallard wants to see how far he can go before breaking. Joe continues to work, recalling how his wife doubted his ability to pay all the bills, and he promised that their child would have a better life. That evening, Mallard notes Joe's growing self-awareness. Suddenly, he sees a name carved out. Alex. Later, he asks the neighbor who Alex is, and the neighbor calls him a legend who managed to escape from here. The next morning, Mallard thanks him for his diligence and gives him a personalized pen. Then she displays a new daily quota, 370 laps. Joe is horrified and expresses his frustration in the rudest way. The AI explains that people don't always realize their strengths. It's tough, but this is how the world changes. A signal sounds, and Joe starts pushing the mill. Suddenly, he notices that the counter doesn't mark the laps. Instead, a cross appears, indicating punishment. 1 cross equals 2 laps, and it continues geometrically. Then, the person gives up, but Joe is not planning to do that. With all his strength, he pushes the mill. However, his strength leaves him. When the neighbor learns the number of laps assigned to him, he becomes furious. Joe exceeded the unattainable number of laps, argued with Mallard, and now, all of them, will suffer. Mallard then announces that he failed to meet the quota and disappointed his colleagues. Taking care of them is the company's main principle, so he will have a new colleague, Kate Stevens. Joe is horrified when he sees his wife's face on the screen and promises to exceed any plan just to keep her from being here. Mallard gives him 1 day and activates a massive glowing screen above his compartment, not allowing him to rest. A new workday begins, and Joe starts pushing his mill under Mallard's wishes for a productive day. Suddenly, he sees himself in front of him, a second Joe mocking his hopes. He worked his whole life, hoping his efforts would pay off, but now he's failed and should give up. However, Joe stubbornly continues pushing the mill, and at exactly 10 he completes 370 laps. Mallard congratulates him on this and cancels the penalty. As motivation, they show him images of his wife with a baby in her arms. Joe cries tears of joy, but immediately afterward, tears of sorrow as he missed his son's birth. In the morning, he asks his neighbor to tell him everything he knows about this place. The neighbor recalls his son, whom he saw only in his childhood because his father was always at work. He advises Joe to investigate the blind spot. Joe rushes to the wall and, after a long contemplation, finds an erase spot. Remembering the gifted pen, he uses it to puncture the wall and slightly expand the recess overnight. But a new day dawns and Joe begins pushing the mill, and at night, he again chips away at the wall. This continues for many days and nights. Eventually, he manages to create a hole he can crawl through. Joe crawls through it, but ends up in complete darkness, where suddenly a person appears, hits him on the head, and wishes him sweet dreams. Joe regains consciousness in his chamber. The hole is sealed, and the AI voice sounds once more. Mallard is disappointed, but still willing to give him one last chance. He's so fixated on his desires that he doesn't see the big picture. So his neighbor was punished, and his quota has been increased to 1,000 laps per day. Joe rushes to the wall and learns that his neighbor's leg is broken, and he won't be able to complete even a single lap. Afterward, the man confesses that they are being controlled by a computer he created himself. The first algorithm he wrote self-improved and created the second, and so on. Now people don't know how it works. Then Joe has an epiphany. If they don't work, everyone's score will drop to 0. And what will the algorithm do then? Joe shouts to the others, telling them about his discovery. People respond, supporting his proposal to stop working. But the workday begins, and everyone starts pushing their mills because they are afraid of dying. Joe tries to persuade his neighbors, but realizing the futility, he cries and picks up the pen. In the evening, he talks with his neighbor, and the neighbor reveals his name, Alex. He also managed to escape from his chamber but was brought back, just like Joe, so getting out of here is impossible. At night, Joe hears that Mallard has taken away Alex. In the morning, the AI wakes him up and, to boost his spirits, shows him images of his wife and their walking baby. Joe is horrified. He can't be here for so long. He shouts insults at Mallard and he's fired. Immediately, the doors open, and a crowd of clerks enters, positioning themselves on the sides and silently watching Joe as he thrashes among them, trying to get an answer. But then, a man in uniform enters and confesses that he enjoys firings. 12 clerks witnessed each of them. The man loads a syringe and laments Joe's ingratitude when Mallard gave him the whole world. The man hopes to soon have a house available on one of the streets where a single mother with a young son lives. And at that moment, Joe loses control and starts beating him. Mallard announces a security guard's failed mission and his impending firing, while Joe, on the contrary, will be promoted. The man stops, feeling blood on his hands, but the battered guard asks him to continue. And then Joe stands up and shouts that he is not a monster, and he leaves. And right away, Joe finds himself in an office where several employees are sitting, and his interlocutor congratulates him on passing the career advancement simulator. It all happened within an hour, and his son hasn't been born yet. He struggled with middle-level managers but got stuck on the 8th level. Milord realized that he was too good. His productivity increased, his personal qualities improved, and the coup he organized exceeded all expectations. He's a non-conventional thinking leader. Joe takes off the suction cups from himself, but his interlocutor doesn't pay attention and invites him to see his new office. In Milord, there are numerous positions, and you can climb to the top for years. Soon the pair reaches the desired floor, but Joe keeps thinking about the time spent in the simulation. Here's the office with new gadgets. Joe also expects a salary increase and other perks. There's a contract on the table stating that disclosing what he experienced in the simulation will lead to immediate termination. Joe signs it and receives assurances that Milord is his company forever. The man sits down at the table, looks at a photo of his wife, and calls Kate. She's surprised, and the man can barely hold back tears, recalling his long, eventful day. After catching his breath a bit, he promises to burn this damned place. The movie is presented as a science fiction film, but behind every word or action of the hero, the reality of the modern corporate system is clearly revealed. The blatant exploitation of people, causing them to start living to work rather than working to live.